can't hear you.
Nick, we still can't hear you.
Let's have you work that out. Jim, can you tell us about yourself?
Hi there. I'm Jim Durbin. I'm an audio and technical expert. Nick, I'll talk to you later. We'll fix those for you. But Zoom's getting easier and easier. I'm the director of talent acquisition for PeopleReady. We are a staffing firm that hires some 200,000 people, primarily in on-demand and skilled trades. I have a team of sourcers, screeners, virtual onboarders. Our role is a centralized function for 650 locations all across the country.
Thank you, Jim. Rebecca.
Hey there. Rebecca Warren. I most recently led TA for Cracker Barrel Old Country Store, both for home office and the field, so 665 plus stores. The home office team fills the majority of the roles for the home office, and the field TA managers hire all associate managers, as well as support, but don't own hourly hiring. I drove the strategy for our program systems and processes overall, as well as supported, coached, and mentored the TA team. So COVID has taught us that life is too short to not do all the things. So we are in process of trying to relocate back to Arizona.
Thanks, Rebecca. And yes, we are aware of the feedback. This is the most pandemic year webinar roundtable ever. But Nick, can we hear you now? No, we can't. Still can't hear you. This is where we our tech hats, I guess, and try to problem solve things as the IT professionals. So let's do this. We'll come back when we seem to have things worked out. Can you hear you now? No, we still can't. All right. Sorry, everybody, for the.
Got some weird feedback going on too.
It's all three of us when it goes. Each person speaking repeats it.
Yep. No, Anthony, it is not just you hearing the echo. And trying to resolve it.
So if I could butt in here, I think it's the echo is something with Nick's audio. Because when he's muted, it doesn't echo. So I think that his computer is picking up his own output, setting that back instead of whatever he's speaking.
Tell him to drop the earphones and put the other one, see if it helps.
Yeah, try
Sometimes
the other.
Sometimes they do weird stuff.
There, Nick.
Oh, we can hear him.
So it's just on my phone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can.
And there's no echo now. So
that should take care of the echoing because it was running through your phone, I think, and the system. So.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it wasn't muted, so I wasn't sure what was going on. I apologize. Well, I can just sit here and talk on my phone if that doesn't bother anybody.
It works.
I thought AirPods weren't supposed to have those problems, but mine always do.
Yeah, usually I don't have an issue.
Don't shake it. But yeah, we're good to go.
Anyways, I'll do my introduction. So I'm the recruiting manager at a company called APN Staffing and Employment Solutions. We are a regional staffing firm located in Phoenix, Arizona. We do two different industries really. We do automotive dealerships, which is super specific, and then we do healthcare, kind of top to bottom. So APN actually stands for Automotive Personnel Network when it was started in 1991. I am the recruiting manager over here, but really just nominally my scope is a lot bigger than that. I oversee marketing spend, job boards, internal hiring, internal training, onboarding process creation, as well as business development. So we have 13 internal employees. We typically have about 50 to 60 contractors. and we have anywhere from 300 to 400 hires in a year. So that's me.
Well, fantastic. I think we are on our way here. We've taken care of the technical difficulties, and we are ready to dive into our discussion. And so, Nick, you're going to have to pull double duty because you're also advancing the slides for us. So, if we could move to the first question for our panelists.
Are you seeing that up there now?
No.
Oh, nope. I'm sorry. I had to pause the. Here we go. Excuse me.
There we go. There we go. So our first discussion point is obviously everything in 2020 seems to have changed. For you, our panelists, in high volume and hourly recruiting especially, what has been the biggest change pre to post COVID-19? And let's kick it off with you, Jim. What have you found?
I think it's probably the economic impact. It is shocking to find out that Indeed and ZipRecruit and others don't have a massive number of resumes that were pouring in after all the layoffs, just a high amount of unemployment. They did not see a giant surge in resumes. And what that led to was a good portion of us, and I think everyone across the board, has a higher cost to find candidates with less candidates. So kind of like the last 3 or 4 years where you've had a shrinking pool of people as the unemployment rate went down. Strangely enough, as it shot up, it was still hard to get to people. You had the issues of some cities in lockdowns, many people being fearful, but finding out that our costs were going up and it was still harder to find people was probably the biggest shock going on, because now people would say hello. They'd say they might have an interest, but the amount of ghosting appeared. Like what they might want to do on Monday doesn't occur on Thursday. So I would say that was the biggest, is the change that didn't occur with the unemployment rate, was probably the biggest thing for us.
Yeah. Nick, what have you found?
Yeah, our biggest change and biggest issue has really been onboarding. For us in this hourly high volume world, our contracts require a ton of paperwork to have to be filled out. And while there are some jobs where the people do really well at that, there are other jobs where people just really have a hard time and struggle with doing any sort of a virtual onboarding via DocuSign or whatever that product might be. So, when we first got into the pandemic, obviously no one was really seeing anyone, and we were trying to do everything virtually, and we saw that our hiring effectiveness, which we just track as a percentage of people that accept an offer versus the people that actually make it to that day one start, it just plummeted, right? And it plummeted because we didn't get to meet them face to face. I think that there is just so much to be said for when candidates come into the office to do these types of paperwork packets and get to meet you and grow a little bit of a relationship with you. And not only that, but ask questions. People are not only asking normal questions like, what shift am I again? Please explain, the different pay rates or the shift differentials, but they're also asking about the safety of the work environment that they're going to go into. Where do they see how many, because we're in healthcare. So there are, people that are active COVID in the facilities that we're working at. And obviously how many at what time is always changing. So is there a dashboard they can go see? I mean, all these things are just really important, and they don't seem to come out as much unless you're in front of them. So we found that whole process cumbersome. We had a pretty big decrease in our effectiveness. And what we did to resolve that is we started bringing people into our office and doing the DocuSign. We would set up either a conference room or another office with a laptop, set them in there, let them do it. That way we can answer questions for them. We can come in and walk them through things. Of course, we're doing, a lot of safety measures. We have masks. We have a temperature checking station at our front door of both of our offices, hand sanitizer all over the place. But, we want to be safe about it, but we also want to put people to work. The last quick thing I'll say just real quick is that we've seen a lot of people that were never, ever interested in doing contract or travel work, mostly nurses, come to a situation where they had to be open to that, because when people shut down facilities, certain departments were let go, and people that had great permanent jobs were now on the market. So we've seen a major shift in talent as well.
Got very interesting. And Rebecca, you've got some interesting experiences as well. Oh, and she dropped off, so we're gonna have to we're gonna have to let her come back in so we can get to this question. A kind of a follow-up question for you, Nick, on that. What was the I guess the impact, you mentioned, because having all these folks come in person in this whole different sort of world of sign in, give us your health, do this healthcare screening before we can even talk to you and take you through the process. Did you have any folks that were hesitant to do the in-person part of the process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, when you see me grab my phone, it's because I'm putting myself manually on and off mute. I guess I should probably do that with the button on my screen. That would be smarter. But yeah, absolutely we did. I mean, we have seen, there's a lot of people actually in healthcare, not so much right now, but in the beginning of the pandemic, where they just were taking a couple months off from working as nurses or as medical assistants or as emergency department techs or whatnot. Maybe they weren't afraid for themselves. Maybe they lived with a loved one that is immunocompromised, whatever the reason might be. But yeah, I mean, the people that were not willing to come in and do that paperwork were the same people that weren't willing to really go to work at that point anyway.
Right.
But there was a high number of those people, of course, yes.
Yeah.
I think you've seen a big difference now too, because many of those people in the healthcare were laid off or furloughed for a period of time because no more elective surgeries. So at the same time, we struggled to find nurses in a lot of places. There's a lot of people flat out didn't have work. There's a lot of changes that occurred from everything from schools to how you spend your days to what do you watch on TV. And if you want to look at the big change after having gone through this for the 6 or 8 months, people's habits have changed, and habits are the single biggest driver of long-term behavior. If you stop doing something over a period of time, you don't necessarily always come back. So now we're looking at people who went into work because they felt like they had to. We see 2-parent and multifamily homes where people they're like, maybe we don't all have to work. There's the fear, if I go into a restaurant and I take this job, Cracker Barrel, obviously she's not here yet, but if you go back and take a job, one person tests COVID, you lose your job while everybody cleans and you wait for a period of time. Everyone said, hey, you know what? We have hazard pay that goes on for a bit. And what you see is people realize maybe that the way we worked before, they don't have to do. And we're all struggling because to figure out what that means. The whole idea of ghosting now, and we begin to see that more, but who fills out paperwork and then doesn't show up?
Yeah.
That's becoming so common. And the question is, did we not tell them enough? Did we not share it? Did we not let them know that it was worth their time? Did something happen? We don't know the answers to these. And as TA folks, we have to learn them now.
Yeah.
So it's us adjusting the habits. I don't think there are good answers yet. We're going to learn them.
That really takes us, that's a great segue into our next question, Nick, if you want to move to that question. And I'm going to really kind of ask Jim to expand on that a little bit, because you mentioned hazard pay. Some of the things that we've changed to assure these new hires coming in, or entice them perhaps to come in. In addition to that, what other sorts of adjustments or perhaps new offerings do you think we've been messaging perhaps differently?
Well, I mean, obviously the availability of PPE is pretty important for anybody who's working with the public. But it's more than that. It's not just, do you have a mask? Are you cleaning things out? Do you have a temperature station? Because we all know if you have kids, you know what you do when your kid has the average person, when their kid has a fever and a runny nose. You give them some ibuprofen, you wipe their nose, you drop them off at daycare anyway, because you got to get into work. To think that people aren't doing that in COVID, are aware that other people aren't do that. I mean, who's wearing an ice pack to work just so when they get there, their temperature's a little lower? So there's all kinds of real concerns that people have. And it's not just a matter of, are you safe? We have people that get sent home because they take their mask off in the middle of an 8-hour break, or they pull it down just a little bit over their nose, or they're not wearing it, and boom, they're sent home. And others, they don't come back because they don't tell somebody to pull that mask down.
Right.
There's a question of how good a mask is, and it's very complex. And what
Yeah.
happens is the biggest, I think the biggest whiplash has probably been money too, because the money that was coming out, the $600 a month from the federal stimulus, was so big. Most people, it made more sense to stay home. If you weren't making $18 or more in most areas,
Right.
you're working 40 hours and taking a risk for $2 an hour more, and that just didn't make sense.
Right.
Now that's gone away and hazard pay has gone away, many companies don't realize you can't. Now it feels like it got taken away. A 30% pay raise gets taken away, and you're like, why can't you always do this? And I think that we're adjusting to that.
Yeah.
What is, and it's not gone away. The pandemic hasn't gone away, but we definitely have fatigue setting in. So the question really becomes, what are long-term changes? Is it $15 an hour is the new minimum wage?
Yeah.
Because that's what the stimulus set it at. But long term, is that sustainable?
Well,
I think we'll find out in the next 6 months.
yeah. And I think another interesting aspect of it really has been, for this very, very heightened moment in time, we had a very real realization and a recategorization of who were essential workers, and we deemed jobs that we had not really deemed essential before as essential to get us through, and that certainly became Nick's world, being in healthcare. So, what kind of whiplash factors have you seen in healthcare, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. We luckily the demand has not whiplashed, as I spoke to before. I mean, one of the great things about our clients, for the most part, is we're working for government agencies, and of course, there's always a demand for people there. But what there wasn't for a long time was an ability to orient new staff. When this all came down, and at least in Arizona, the economy got shut down, everyone was sent home. Everyone that wasn't, deemed essential, right? That conversation we just had about who is, who isn't. Well, the educators that do orientations were sent home. The people that are at the front door were sent home. And it took a good 60 to 90 days for a lot of these facilities to get to a point where they felt comfortable bringing certain people back in, to get their policies and procedures in place for that, to reevaluate how many people can we sit in this little room and keep them 6 feet away, and is that enough for us? Do we feel safe with that? Do we want to go less than that? It was craziness, and at least happy to say we've gotten most of those things figured out. But the demand for us has always been high, which is great. We have done some hazard pay across the board, especially on anyone that is working in facilities where they have contact with either COVID positive cases or people that are awaiting testing for COVID-like symptoms. So that has been very successful in not only getting new people to come in, but also to keep the people that we have there. And to Jim's point, the question is going to come up, and I'm already hearing it a lot. Well, why am I not going to get this $3 or $4 an hour more for the rest of the year? Right. Some of our clients had pay issues where they were a little low for the market, and now they're, right where they're supposed to be. And are these people going to leave when that goes away? When is it going to go away? Mm-hmm. We just don't know the answers to these questions. So I think the answer to all of it, though, is just understanding. We have to be understanding of all these situations that come up. I can't be the dictator to somebody as to, or I can't dictate to them when they need to work from home or when they need to take time off, because if your child's sick and they have a fever and you show up, you can't go there for 7 days now. Now I have an employee that has a 3-year-old child at home for a week minimum. What do we do? Yeah. You have to work remote, even if that's an essential person that needs to be in the office. There's not really a lot of options there. So that's what we've seen.
And Rebecca, welcome back, Rebecca. Yay!
Come back.
You certainly, obviously we're working through these, early part of the year here with when everything sort of hit, and of course within an industry that was, again, for the most part open, albeit in a different way. So what were some of the things that you did to give that assurance to your candidates, to your new hires, who were folks that were concerned?
Yeah, so when everything hit, our dining rooms got shut down. We still were able to do off premise, and most of the retail shops were open. So we were able to keep some folks there, but everyone else did go. We worked through a texting capability. We have about 70,000 hourly employees. And so we texted them through Text HR regularly, saying, hey, how are you doing? When are you coming back? Call your store if you have questions. And then the managers in the store, along with the HR business partners, really started connecting in with everyone, letting them know what was happening, when the dining rooms might open back up again. The managers, for the most part, were running off-prem, and a lot of the retail shops. The challenges have been interesting because it used to be grill cooks that Cracker Barrel struggled with, and now, for the most part, it's servers and retail associates. Applicants about guest interaction. Parents aren't letting kids come back to work, which of course I totally understand. Employees live with high-risk family members. Some folks are looking to switch industries. So we've been trying really hard to make sure that we are staying connected to not only our current employees, but also as we try to attract new employees, adding a health and safety paragraph to our job ads so that applicants know that that Cracker Barrel is taking it seriously. All of our employees wear masks, hand sanitizer throughout the building. We actually eliminated the night maintenance position, where it used to be someone would come in and do all the cleaning and everything overnight. They now repurpose that into a day health and safety specialist, and that role is to sanitize everything in the store all the time. And there also is a clear plan in place that's posted for store employees about what to do when an employee or a guest suspects or is suspected of exposure. But it's a different space when you go into the restaurants. It feels different. Everybody's got, I think, a heightened sense of awareness. But the interesting thing also is that guests tend to be less patient. We all had the idea that guests were going to be so excited to come back into restaurants and be kind, and some folks are not very kind. So that's been a challenge as well, because some of the servers are like, I don't want to deal with someone who's going to come in and scream at me about, a hash brown casserole not being exactly the way they want it. So that's been a bit of a challenge as well.
I do love me the Cracker Barrel hash brown casserole. I do have to say that
it is a tasty treat.
It is indeed. And that, that's another good, man, we're good. That's a really good segue into our next question. Nick, if you want to move the slide forward, speaking about not just what, some of those things we've done to give assurance, but how has this world sort of affected the places where you traditionally source or hire? And how have you adjusted? How are you adjusting going forward? So I'm going to toss that right back to you, Rebecca, to kind of continue on with, how you've adjusted in this aspect of it.
Yeah. So we've done a combination of things. So digital marketing, of course, recruitment marketing has always been helpful. We've turned up all the notches on that. Advertising in spots that maybe you wouldn't normally think about on TikTok, Spotify, Pandora, of course, all of the normal job boards, kicking that up, as well as looking at social media in different spaces. And then, of course, other non-traditional spots that our recruitment marketing agency has identified. Cracker Barrel hasn't done as much in the past of local store marketing, and they're starting to do that now. So now hiring banners and signs. That used to be a pretty clear line of what space TA had in the stores and what was owned by ops and marketing. And now there's more of a blend. So there's more of an opportunity for us to advertise in the stores directly, signs out in the front. And the other thing is switching what we're looking for. So, you know, the model of if you have X number of applicants, that means that you have good flow, which that term, we're trying to work with to look at it differently to say, how many openings do you have? What kind of candidates are applying? Let's not throw them out if they don't have the exact schedule that you want or the exact background that you want. Let's look for the talent and the potential that they could potentially bring in using experience or other things to say they're not a fit. So shifting in terms of saying, talk to every single person who applies and see if there's an opportunity there. If you hire them for a short time and it doesn't work out, well, then you part, no harm, no foul. But trying to switch not only where we're looking, but also the attitude of what we're looking for and who might actually be successful that maybe we didn't consider before.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that's a lesson that organizations have learned across the entire employee life cycle, if you will, is that flexibility, not just in who we're looking to hire, but how we're letting them perform their job and schedules and all that sort of thing. What about you, Jim? What have you found with kind of sourcing and hiring and any adjustments you've made?
I'm going to echo Rebecca said about you can't look at the number of applicants now. First of all, that was always a bad number, but it always made us feel better because when you're hiring so many people, all anybody's ever thought of is, oh, it's the internet. There's a giant pool of candidates that all exist out there. Of course, there are 10,000 cooks in Nashville. How hard could it be to find them? I'll just open 6 more restaurants and you go find them. And that's always been a challenge with high volume. There is a certain number of candidates. I tend to say it's basically like a garden hose. You know, if everybody lines up, they get a cup of water, but somebody comes in with a giant bucket, there's no way to make it go faster. There is a limited number of people for any job in any area. And when you're trying to do it locally, you know, it's stores know this more than most. There's a geographical center of where their clients come from and where the workers come from. No one's driving 45 miles across the city to go work for a job that they could take half a mile for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those internal things, the idea that we just have lots of candidates has hurt us, which is hard because we have had to go digital. A lot of our referrals and typical networking events at our local offices, you can't do them anymore. And that's a big source of our best employees is somebody saying, I love my job. You can come work with us as well. When they're no longer doing that, when they're no longer sitting down and actually talking to people in our branches, that's a real challenge.
Yeah.
So we've gone digital. We've done some different things. We've tried virtual events. They don't really work that well. But now we have things called drive-through HR events, where literally if we have a parking lot and people come in like it's a Rally's or an old-time sock hop diner, they're sitting in their cars, and it's just like the Chick-fil-A or In-N-Out folks. They come up with an iPad, and you're doing your paperwork and sitting in the parking lot. Those have been wildly successful because I guess it helps make people feel better. The problem is you can't do that every day, everywhere. But trying to come up with new ways like that. Of course, we've changed our marketing mix up quite a bit. And I think the big aspect is not thinking about it as everybody. I don't want to have 140% more candidates. I want a conversion rate that's 30% instead of 15. And that takes a much different look. It's like Rebecca was saying of let's talk to each person. Because one, that's our sense of referrals. And two, just because you came onto my website and said you wanted to work the 8 to 5 shift doesn't mean that you're not going to work a 3 to 11 shift. It just means that's your preference because my UI asks you to do that. And when that goes into our systems and then someone says, well, I only want to search people that specifically said this was their shift, you're missing out on a lot of people. So it's talking to each one and understanding that we created these filters in a time of plenty. Now we've got to figure out how do we actually talk to someone and say, what do you really want? And then find ways to capture that information.
Yeah.
So it's not just the numbers of people we're dragging in. It's understanding that if someone wants to work, do we have a role for them? And that may not be something you can pull up from your ATS. It may take a human being to figure that out.
Wow, imagine that. Humans talking to humans. What a mind.
Or really sophisticated chatbots, whichever works.
Nick, I know you've certainly found referrals very successful traditionally, as well as other sources. You know, what have you seen change in in your hiring channels, your sources, and I guess specifically referrals.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo what Jim said too. I think nurturing the people that are coming in, the people that are applying is so important right now. We have the same type of a thing where you put your preference of shifts, and you really have to dig into it with each person. Well, why is that? And have you thought about this? And sometimes I'm the one that's coming up with solutions to their childcare issue, or giving them referrals to childcare places so they can do other things, and we've been successful at that. So I love that he said that. Anyways, referrals for us, actually, I would not say referrals were very successful prior for us. Referrals were very successful for us in getting people into our talent pool, but we've never seen a high number of them convert to actual hires for whatever reason over the years. And they're way up right now. I think that anyone that's in a clinical situation, excuse me, at least on the healthcare side, is they are looking at their job. They're looking at whether they're understaffed or not. They're looking at whether that facility is safe or not, how they're handling situations when an employee comes in that's a coworker of theirs and they're not feeling good. Are they jumping right on that and having them leave and quarantine to get a test, or are they trying to bury it a little bit and keep their staff on site? So I think that's one of the reasons why the referrals are coming into us so much. And not only that, but these referrals are turning into hires now. They're turning into hires fast. So I think that right now, when nurses are talking to other nurses or any clinical staff, and they're saying, hey, where are you working? What are you hearing out there? And they hear, hey, here's a great place to work. It's safe. They're taking things seriously. It's happening like that, and it's going quickly. We are not really getting into the virtual events. I love what Jim said about the drive-thrus. I think that's a genius idea. But we used to do a lot of conferences and hiring events. We're not doing any of those now. So we're very much on the job boards. And I think that, if I can say one more thing, the changes in the job boards has been drastic. In the past, certain job boards were very good at certain levels of positions. I typically would take a dollar amount per hour. And some job boards did better below that, others above that. And we're seeing that flip-flop a lot right now. And not just once since the pandemic started, but 2 or 3 times. Every month, things are changing. So we really are on top of evaluating what we're doing, how it's working, and then adjusting every month if we need to.
Wonderful. Let's go on to our next question, which kind of takes us to a little bit of a shift. In that it talks about us more than the candidates. Everybody here is, and has done for some time, is doing high volume recruiting. So what separates recruiters who perform well in a high volume role versus those who don't? I'm gonna kick that right back to you, Nick, if you want to start with that one.
Yeah, great. From my experience, for myself, other people that I've seen here in my community, my immediate community, I think that it has to do with tenacity. Just having a strong determination to get things done, no matter what happens, no matter if all seems lost, because that happens. The highs are high, the lows are lows, and for whatever reason, at least in my world, they all come at the same time. So you have a week or two where it's just all lows. And then you have a week or two where it's all highs and everybody's really happy. So having that, my wife likes to say that I have a little less emotional intelligence than most people, and that honestly might help too, because I try not to buy into that negativity when it comes, and I also don't get too crazy when the highs come. I just kind of try to stay in the middle and do what we need to do and get the job done. I also think honesty is huge. When you are dealing with a high volume of applicants, you have to not only, in my opinion, be very honest, but portray that honesty. Because even if you're being honest and you don't sound like it for whatever reason, candidates pick up on that and they scurry quickly. So I think honesty is just so huge.
Love it. Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think anyone in recruiting, high volume or not, you have to be driven internally and you have to focus on the end game. If you're going into TA for the recognition, you're in the wrong place, right? You're only as good as your last hire. And if it's a hiring class, I mean, there's not a lot of external recognition that happens on the reg, in my opinion. So you've got to be driven to see that end result. So it's about filling classes or filling that particular, those spots. It's playing the numbers game, as we talked about, but it's also making sure that we're continuing to educate folks on the right type of candidate and how to think about what a good applicant actually is. And then, of course, we have to make sure that we're always paying attention to the turnover rate, because as we know, the more people we're able to save or keep in our organization and keep engaged, the less we have to hire externally. So I also think in high volume recruiting, especially, it's staying close to the folks that actually are responsible for the onboarding and the training and development as you go forward, especially in those first couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Jim, what's your take on it?
I want to make sure we make a clear delineation between recruiting and sourcing. In fact, I've banned the word recruiting in my organization. You're not allowed to say it. And the reason is recruiters and headhunters are not like folks who are necessarily inside the company, and they're not necessarily like the ones in high volume. There's a huge difference, because as a headhunter, which I did for years, you have to emotionally attach to the person. And you get a thrill out of helping a manager, helping a director, helping someone get that job. That's what drives you. The check is fantastic, but you want to feel good about it. The second you move first into a regular recruiting role inside a company and you're dealing with 30 or 40 recs, you don't have time for that. So you're struggling to have that, but at least you can see internally what you're doing for a director. At the type of volume we're talking about, which I've run people who had 2,000 hires a year. Now it's an average of 8,000 hires a year. There's zero recognition that you're going to get, because there's always a new need. And the problem is that because of that, the people who used to at least have a manager they talked to who said, thank you for helping us, at a certain point, you're a traffic manager and you're driving people into the funnel, you're getting no recognition. So you have to be organized and know how your system works. You have to follow trends. So if you hire 8,000 people a year, you get a tiny bit of credit for each one of those 8,000 people. And the only way for you to feel good is to know that at the end of your day, you did what you could to move that needle. There is no other recognition that's coming your way. And it's not the number of contacts you sent out on Indeed. It's not how well you wrote a job description. It is day in and day out. Do you know how well you did? And what we're finding, because we just added a whole bunch of people to try to teach them some of those roles, is the importance of that. They have to know the impact of their work. So if you're not tracking things, if your reporting system isn't up to standard, none of your sources will know how well they did. And the ones who think they did won't have a clue. It's like, how do you know what you did that day? So we've got the importance of, they've got to be able to read reports to focus on their day, which means they have to be organized, internally motivated, and you've got to provide the infrastructure on that back end. Otherwise, they could be working very hard and accomplishing nothing. That's a very hard thing to manage if you can't tell how well they've done.
Yep. So that's the people. Let's go to our next slide and talk about the tech. We already had our shout out to a chat bot, so we've checked that one off to a bit. But for all the advances made in tech and hiring tech up to now, did it pay off? How did your tech stack perform throughout 2020 with all these changes? Rebecca, what did you find?
Yeah, so I started towards in June of 2019, and so figuring out even what we had. So iCIMS was our ATS, and then a lot of things hadn't been enabled, and it actually was living with a different team within Cracker Barrel. So getting that back and figuring out what we had and what we needed, it was actually nice to have a lot of room to move. I couldn't add a lot of programs. I couldn't add a lot of things. Dollars just weren't there. So we really dug into what we had and then focused on what we needed. So we were able to build out iCIMS more robustly, adding text recruit, text apply, doing a lot more with reporting, as Jim talked about, so we actually knew what we were doing, adding dashboards for our hiring manager so they got a chance to see what was happening real time. We eliminated our third-party scheduling software. We moved to text scheduling within the platform as well. So we really actually hunkered down and used what we had. Now, if I had my druthers, would I want to add a whole bunch of stuff? amazing stuff through Eightfold, looking at some other vendors to help us add. But we were able to do it within the iCIMS suite that we had, and then Tableau, which we had throughout our organization, really helped with reporting and analytics and really understanding the numbers. So we actually went in instead of out in 2020.
Yeah. Back to you, Jim. What did you find with technology this year?
So my role is relatively new. I've only been in it 6 months for this, but I've dealt with a lot of these changes before. And what I'm finding is you cannot believe anything a vendor tells you, or your tech people tell you, or salesperson tells you. You have to dig in. And I'm not blaming vendors or tech or sales. I'm blaming us because we're not clear on what our KPIs are. I know what mine is now. I need you in my system filling out an application, and then I have other people responsible for putting you to work. So it's not the number of clicks that came in. It's not the click per, it's not the sponsored click for one of the things, or even what they call the CPA. The more we dug into it, we see that we ask other people to understand our business, and then when they deliver exactly what we said, we're not thinking past it. So if you're building out an ATS, have you planned out your SEO ahead of time? Have you done your UX ahead of time? When a report comes to you, is everybody looking at it saying, well, that's weird. Why would it show that number? Sometimes it's just our Excel sheets. An Excel sheet has a title that everybody goes, oh, that must mean applicants. And you're like, does it? And then you have to ask, but does it? But does it? And everybody's looking at the report saying, yeah, it's right in front of us. So I've always had problems with the UI, people believing what's in front of them. And so a big thing for our tech stacks, I keep asking, what is it actually showing? What is the actual number of opens? You're sending automated emails out of your ATS. What's their open? Have you looked at the IP changes? Do you actually know what deliverability is for your email? Because if you ask your tech person, they'll say, yes, it got delivered. I want to know, did somebody open it? Did it go into the social folder in Gmail? Did it go into the spam folder? Because I have a no reply email address. We have to get better at the stuff we're asking our vendors and tech people and really understand what we're asking. I think that's where we're going now with most of ours. Is what you're saying happening? If it isn't, is it my fault or your fault? And then how do I get an actual result? And for me, that result is that person available to work? And that's a simple KPI that comes, and I can work backwards from that. But for me, that's the big issue. Text, marketing, email. We're using AWS now. We started using a bunch of stuff on Amazon. I wanted to use all these other side ones that I knew worked for marketing. But AWS has fantastic sentiment analysis for calls. It tells you open rates. You can actually dig into those databases. And it's not something that we tend to have used. We tend to just send something out. And it gives us a whole new world to look at what's actually occurring. If I send a note to 100,000 people, how many opened? And maybe I should have sent 50 notes to 2,000 people. So for us, a lot of it's doing real A/B testing with null hypothesis segments, and not just saying, I'm going to reach out to everybody and hopefully they'll show up ready to work. So it's testing and smaller batches and using the tech that's out there, and then asking, are you actually reporting what it is you're claiming to that you're reporting to me? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love
Sometimes
that.
People are like, what? Your vendors lied to you? No, that's not it. It's not their fault. I asked them to do something that I shouldn't have asked them to do, and then I'm mad because so a lot of it is the reporting. What does our tech actually do?
So Nick, what about you? What does your tech actually do, and what have you discovered here in 2020?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Jim and Rebecca, especially on the part Jim said about asking them to do a certain thing. I mean, these technologies are getting so complicated now that trying to get them to all marry together is just really difficult, and it does take some pretty deep digging to see what's going to happen, how to make it work. Is it going to work? I mean, just because something does something great doesn't mean it's going to work for you or your team, right? But for us, thankfully, we did a lot of work in the years leading up to this. We had implemented some texting solutions, which, 2 years ago, I don't know how we ever did it without it, honestly. But for us, digging into those solutions and really getting better at them has been where we've seen a lot of success. So our text messaging solution, not only can you just text a candidate and say, hey, I got your application, left you a message, you can when you get them on the phone and set up an interview, you can schedule a text reminder so that they have details the morning of their interview. You can schedule them a reminder before their first day. You can do all these neat things. You can mass text people when you're dealing with a group that's going to an orientation. So really digging into that and using those things to our advantage. Also, just from the problems we had earlier on in this webinar, it doesn't seem like I know how to do Zoom very well because we use Google Meet. But we really had to dig into that too. I mean, we're on the agency side, so it's a little bit different. But we are now sending invitations between candidates and clients from our accounts. We are jumping on those virtual interviews in the beginning. We're making the introduction, we're doing the handoff, and then we're jumping out of that meeting. And that's not something we've ever done before. And I have people on the team that were terrified of that because they've never done anything like that. And so we've had to just kind of dig in and teach people and learn and be patient and go from there.
Yep.
That's amazing. You're setting up interviews. It's like the old days when we walked people in and then walked out. Now you're doing it, but you're doing it on Zoom just to make sure things are working. That's incredible.
It's weird.
I love it. Let's move to our last question for the panel here, and back to our people, the people that work side by side with us, that do the work, that do the recruiting. What about your team? And throughout this year, what have you discovered, and are you looking at any different ways to run, build, or rebuild perhaps your recruiting team moving forward? So Jim, what have you discovered?
I think there's two big parts of it. One is that people who are used to a mature system struggle. And so I think as you inject complexity into hiring environments, hiring for adaptability is probably your most important thing. People have to be comfortable, which also means that you don't get to say, hey, I need this done in 6 months. And that person who could do it in 5 months and 2 weeks was great. But if you change it every month, they just completely fall apart. So we've got to structure ourselves in terms of management to say, what does adaptability mean? What are we sacrificing? And are we moving the ship in the right direction? The harder part is, I think we haven't quite grasped this. So I've been on a couple calls about mental health, not for our company, but just in general. There's a lot of anxiety out there. We see people freaking out, doing weird things, bursting out in anger, which is what happens when you're isolated and when you have things that are out of your control. You have fear of being laid off. So I think our managers have to start paying a lot of close attention to someone's mental health, taking time off, making sure that you're clear about what expectations are. We can't promise you're not getting laid off for somebody, but you can discuss that fear. Very hard for us to do because most of us aren't built to understand that. In high volume, it's how are we going to get this next set of KPIs done? But if you're not paying attention to that, you're missing out on the opportunity to not only build loyalty, but actually take care of your people. Because if someone who hasn't talked in 2 months may break down and you had no clue it was coming because no one ever thought to say, hey, are you doing okay? But then once you start down that's a tough thing. Like, no, I want more money. I want this. This is hard. There's lots of complaints. So we have to become better managers of people, which is funny, but high volume really has to learn how to do that because otherwise, when you're touching 5,000 people, if you're in a bad mood that day, you prefer them not to work. And you've got to figure out, are they okay? And that is now one of our primary concerns. Probably always should have been, but it's definitely, are your people okay to go out and talk to folks?
Yep. Rebecca, what did you find? Because you have a combo team, headquarters and remote at Cracker Barrel.
Right. Yeah, so the field team had always been remote, so it was business as usual for them. But the home office team and the folks in the home office is where there were a lot of struggles. And so to go along with what Jim said is that adjustment. Kids are home, people are home, things are different. We're asking them to do different work. We were trying to look at who has capacity to do things. We did everything we could to make sure that there weren't a ton of layoffs, but that was inevitable. But looking at what could people be stretched into doing, we rolled out teams faster than I think Cracker Barrel has ever rolled out anything in their history, and so that made lives a lot easier. I can't imagine imagine what it would have been like through COVID with just doing things through our, call-in conference line. So being able to see people was really important. And what Jim said as well about staying connected to people. So my home office TA team, where we weren't hiring, was we tasked them and myself to call every single leader within the home office and say, how are you doing? How is your team? What does capacity look like? Are you staying connected? Asking those questions. And I think for teams going forward, the teams had been stretched a lot, including myself, right? So looking for different things now, looking for ability to deal with change, ambiguity, asking the team to start looking for trends. What are they seeing out there so we can adjust more quickly? And then absolutely clear communication and more transparency. We can't make promises, but we certainly can have better conversations.
Wonderful. And Nick, what have you learned about your team?
Yeah, it's been super fun. I know that much. We really have just had to, once again, really look at who needs to be in the office. A lot of we never thought about before. We've never really been remote, so we really had to think about who needs to be here, who doesn't need to be here, what are mission critical, what aren't, and then not only that, but come up with contingency plans for, what if person A that's so critical on this one day is out? I mean, I never used to really think about that because we had a strong team that was here. And now all these things are coming up that are just so unforeseen. I mean, I keep mentioning the childcare thing, but that has been the biggest issue to both all of our contractors and our internal employees, is that a kid gets sick with just a normal cold, and they're out for 2 weeks and they have nowhere to take their child and they can't go to work because of it. So coming up with those contingency plans has been critical to make sure that we keep, moving the needle forward.
Mm-hmm. Yet another lesson that we've learned across, I think, every element of our businesses, not just in our talent functions. So what an absolutely wonderful discussion, and been keeping an eye on the Q&A from attendees, and we don't have any. So we took ourselves right to the close of the hour. Thank you to Nick and Jim and Rebecca for giving us lots of information and lessons learned. We are at the end of the hour here, so let's hand it back over and do a little closeout via ATAP. Thank you, ATAP, so much for hosting this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and thank you to our panelists. We definitely very much appreciate it, and we appreciate you guys as viewers hanging in with us with the small technical issues we had in the beginning. But just to recap, as I shared earlier, an email will be sent to all of you who registered for this event with links to the recorded session, as well as a copy of the slide deck for you to keep on file for yourself. Our next webinar is this month in October, on the 29th, on how veteran ready is your organization. And to register for this webinar, you can go ahead and move over to atapglobal.org. Look under the Learning tab at the top right of the page and select Webinars, and you will find that registration page there. While there, please also consider perhaps joining ATAP as a member, or maybe getting involved as a volunteer in any of our councils that enables important work like this webinar and others for the talent acquisition community. So thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful week and stay safe.